Okay, so this first story is about rabbits. When my brother and I were little, we ended up having a lot of rabbits. So my brother's rabbit was Huckleberry. It was a giant white Angora rabbit. And his rabbit before then was Scotty. Scotty, that was the first pet we had that died. That was the first rabbit we had. And so we also had 2 dogs that were Australian Kelpies, and our family is a bit of a hippie family, so the idea was there would be no cage for our animals. And so in the garden we had all the rabbits running free, and the guinea pigs. We also had 2 guinea pigs, and we also had the 2 dogs. And one of the dogs, Jenny, would eat the rabbit's food. So we have this photo of the rabbit eating out of the bowl, and then Jenny's on the other side, my dog, eating the rabbit food with the rabbit in the same bowl. And one of our dogs, Bruno, was quite a tough, big rescue dog. And he was very affectionate, but he would often get aggressive with his love for someone. And so Bruno basically ripped Scotty's guts open when we were at school, and Dad buried Scotty. And then John came home from school and he wanted to see Scotty. So Dad had to dig up Scotty because apparently it's really healthy for kids to try and understand death. So my brother would have been 7, I would have been 8. And so my dad dug Scotty back up, and that was apparently the right thing to do to help my brother understand. And he just remembers my brother just poking at Scotty's guts and trying to make sense of what was happening. And so our teacher for school would get all of our journal entries. And so we had to write every week what happened that week. And so there were always entries with rabbits. So this entry I wrote on the 26th of October 94. So, yep, I was 8 years old. This is my rabbit. And I talk about our family of rabbits here. It starts with, I have 7 rabbits. Their names are Fluffy Buffy, that's the mum. That was my rabbit. Huckleberry, that's the dad, my brother's rabbit. We call, for short, my family call him Huck, and 5 baby rabbits. Their names are Pooey, Pooey's mate, Super Bun, Super Pete, and Ginger. And so it's interesting for me with this story with the names as well, because we were little kids, and when we found all the little baby rabbits in the area where they were born, they were blind and had their eyes closed, and one of them had poo on it. So he was Pooey, and another one was next to him, so that was Pooey's mate. So kids are very literal in their naming. And so my rabbit, who I loved, was Fluffy Buffy, and that's Fluffy Buffy here. And I liked Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I called her Fluffy Buffy the Kelpie Slayer because I wanted her to be protected from our Australian Kelpie so that she wouldn't get killed by the Kelpie. And I had a really special bond to this rabbit. So I would go outside barefoot and hang out the washing, and the rabbit would come up and would lick my feet. And then one day in the middle of summer, because it's the Australian summer, so it's really, really hot, and these are rabbits with a crazy amount of fur. In the evening, Huckleberry, who was the husband, the white rabbit, came up to the door and was trying to get Dad's attention, and Dad just ignored it. And then Dad thought it was a bit weird, but just didn't think anything of it. And the next day, Fluffy Buffy, my rabbit, was dead. And it was because it was a heat wave. It was one of the hottest days we had in Australian summer in Sydney on record. And so yeah, that was really tough, and it was really interesting because we always thought the other rabbit was trying to tell us that his wife wasn't doing well, which is incredible to think that they would have that intelligence. So that was my first rabbit dying. And I think it's just when you're a kid, you try to make sense of it. And then when the husband, Huckleberry, died, so every time his wife died, we got another woman for him. And so my brother writes about Huckleberry dying, who was his rabbit. And so in the story, he said, when he's writing this for school, he says he had 3 wives and 23 babies, so he had quite a good life. And I think that's just hilarious and very true, that Huckleberry kept having wives. So that's about rabbits. This is me with Fluffy Buffy and my brother with Scotty. So Scotty was the first pet that died for my brother, and Fluffy Buffy was the first pet that died for me. This is on the trampoline, and we put socks on their ears. We like dressing them up. We actually would put like my hair elastics, my scrunchies on them, and do little photo shoots. So this is the guinea pig. The reflection of the flash in the mirror with the hair elastic for the photo shoot. Then we would put them, these are the babies, we would put them in a stroller, and then we would go around the whole neighbourhood just wheeling them in the stroller. And obviously them on the couch. We just hung out a lot on the couch. So that's me with Fluffy Buffy. And that's another rabbit called Melanie. And I find it really interesting how my relationship to death is the same with humans and with my pets. I feel that I've been really absent for the deaths of all my pets, in a way, especially my dogs. So my favourite dog, Jenny, that I had ever since I was a little kid, that's her when she's older. For Christmas, obviously, I was always dressing her up as well. Jenny was a dog that followed this girl home from school one day, and Jenny followed this girl home, and the girl decided to call her Wednesday. And so they put an ad everywhere, a sign they created all around the suburb they lived in, saying, "We found this dog, is this your dog? There's a lost dog." And nobody claimed the dog. So then they put an ad in the Trading Post, which was a newspaper that everybody got in Sydney, where everybody was trying to trade things. And they said, "Free dog to a good home." And we went, again, I was a child. I was probably still around 7. And we went to go have a look and meet Jenny, who was called Wednesday. And we came home with her on our lap. And she was this figure in our house, which was of complete stability. It was a very chaotic upbringing for me, and a tough time at school, and I was bullied. And I remember I would have some really tough days, and I would come home and Jenny would be lying in the hallway, in the same place she's lying in this photo. She liked lying in the hallway because everybody had to go through the hallway to get anywhere and like have to try not to step on her. So it meant that she always knew where we were. And I remember walking in the front door and lying next to her, and I just lifted up her ear, and then I just like started telling her all of my secrets about my day, and I would just whisper in her ear, and then I'd start crying. And animals are so intuitive. She would just lie there, and then she would start licking my hand and just listening. And yeah, we did a lot of things together. We shared everything. I have this memory of being at the local park and having an ice cream, and I would like have a lick of the ice cream, then I would give Jenny a lick of the ice cream, then I would have a lick of the ice cream, and so on. And so Jenny she lived to an old age, and she was probably 18 when she passed away, but I was living in London and I wasn't there for her death. So that was really hard for me because I was living so far away, and I felt like she'd always been there for me, but I wasn't there for her. My brother was there, and they put her down, and he said that the injection was a really bright green colour when they injected her. But it was this weird thing that when I got home, I expected to see Jenny and she wasn't home. So it was like I grieved all over again. And the same thing with my dog, Charlie. He's just died a few weeks ago while I've been in North America. And I know I was really sad, but it's really going to be when I go home for Christmas, I'm going to really feel it going back and seeing that he's not there. And so Jenny was cremated and her ashes sprinkled in the favourite park where she used to play. And my grandfather was cremated and his ashes were sprinkled in the tennis courts where he used to play tennis because that's what he wanted. And in our family, we're just not a family of people who go to gravestones and who have a relationship of constantly visiting or thinking about the dead. And I think that's because my granddad as well, there were no graves for any of his family, which is what I'm writing about, his story in the Holocaust. And his family are somewhere either cremated or in mass graves, but there are no graves for them. So for me and for my upbringing, death is just a disappearance and an absence. And I thought this was an interesting reflection because my mum's boyfriend has a very close relationship with the dead. He's always going to graves, and so he didn't have children, but he's always had a lot of pets and a lot of dogs. And every time a dog dies, he buys another dog, and often he'll have 4 or 5 dogs at the same time, sometimes also a cat. And I guess they're the family that he didn't have through having children. And what he does when one of his pets dies is he builds a coffin for them himself by hand. He creates a whole burial service in his backyard. Then he ties a fishing line attached to the coffin and it sticks out of the ground, and he knows which pet is which. And so when he's wanting to talk to that pet, he will go up to where they are in the garden and he'll pull the fishing line that's attached deep down to their coffin. And the same with his parents. No fishing line involved, but on their birthdays, on Christmas, on every significant event, he will go to his parents' grave and just sit with the grave and talk to the grave. And this is a very foreign concept for me because with our pets dying, it's always just disappearance and that's it. We don't have funerals or graves for them. The spiralling of Mum's mind loops over and over and over and over and over. Over and under and all around, just turning over and over and over. I know that there's repetition in the way I write and repetition in the way I talk. And I hate to admit it, but I can't deny it. It's the repetition that I get from my mother, the pattern I inherited. It's a cyclical spiral, the spiral she's caught in. My childhood dog, Jenny, eventually also caught in the same spiral, unable to walk in a straight line. She would spiral as she stood up, and as she needed to walk into the next room, she would move in a spiral. I would watch her struggle to get up in the spiraled motion and knew that it was Mum. my childhood dog was physically manifesting Mum's ailments with all the time they'd spent together. Was she trying so hard to take on Mum's pain, the way we all were, to save Mum, to rescue Mum? All of us breaking under the burden too great to bear. Dad's back broke. John's back broke. Jenny walked in spirals. And me, my back is starting to break.